Hey there, Knicks fans. How you doing? It's your boy Jonathan Macri with you for another episode of the Knicks Film School Podcast. Boy, oh boy, they couldn't just go ahead and make this a full-on happy gush fest. No. Because it's the Knicks, and we can never get everything we want. Isn't that right, Jeremy Cohen? Hello, sir. How are you?
Hello, John. You know, I was so excited for my 3-0 week. I nailed it. I got the pick. I beat you this time. All that's left is a game against the Pistons. We're not a bad team, to be clear.
They're not.
Of the games that were on the schedule, I would have thought it was the second best chance at a win. And after we saw the Hornets game, the one in Charlotte for the NBA Cup, I thought, all right, maybe given how the Hornets play, the Pistons game might be the best one to get a win from. But alas, it was not. You won the week, and the Pistons beat the Knicks and snapped the winning streak that I believe dated back prior to the start of COVID.
I mean, if I just know it was around 5 years, like 16 games. So I'm assuming that outlasted. Was that pre-Fizdale? Like, I should have looked this up, but no, it was they probably lost a game during the Fizdale era to the Pistons. If I'm
definitely
spacing this out correctly.
Yes.
To your point about the Pistons being a bad team, I talked for almost 2 hours last night and I didn't make the point. Like, they're 8th in the East in net rating. They're not a bad team by any stretch of the imagination. And like, I think James Edwards III, who obviously covered the Pistons for several years, made the point last night that they're within like 5 possessions of being an over 500 team. So like, yeah, all that's like well and good. It's still annoying. It still sucks. I'm like 1% happy I got the benefit from it with the prediction for this week. But I wish you had won, because if you had won, then we would get to come on here and it would just be effusive, right? It would be like gumdrops and candy canes and rainbows. And now we have to have a little bit of like, yeah, they're still finding their way. Wasn't good enough. The defense might still suck. And it's just like we're still kind of in that early season, mode where I don't think the confidence level for a lot of fans is where they would ideally like it to be after 23 games. Is that a fair way to put it?
Yes, but it's just the nature of this team that's so perplexing. I don't necessarily mean it in a negative way, but it's just like you. What was this week? You start off this week against Orlando Magic team that even without Paolo Banchero, and of course, moving forward, they'll be without Franz Wagner, but that is the number 1 team in the NBA in defense. And the Knicks in the first quarter, I mean, I thought it was a lackadaisical effort for the most part.
Yes.
And then they cleaned it up. And then it was like they were shot out of a cannon. And then the Hornets game, similar effect. And they just destroyed them in the second half. And then the Pistons game started sluggish. And then they caught up a bit of time.
You skipped, understandably so, you skipped over the Pelicans game, which was barely.
No, that wasn't this week. But that wasn't this week.
What are you talking about? It was.
No,
it was.
We had you're right. You're 2-1. Yeah,
you're right.
That's in the rearview mirror.
Yeah, my bad.
But I mean, different story. But so with this game with the Pistons one, I mean, it was lost in the first quarter. Didn't have the lead, and the Knicks have done a great job of being a second and third quarter team. Fourth quarter has been very much the worst part of how they operate. And yet this week, the first quarter felt like it's taking them a little bit of time to adjust, and they either have the gear to rise above it, or like we saw in the Pistons game, they simply didn't.
Yeah, and I think it is a little bit having to do with the gear to rise above it, or not having the gear to rise above it, and also a lot to do with the opponent. The funny thing about what you're saying is, I just looked it up right now. I'm not going to ask you to guess, because if I guess this, I would be wrong by 15 spots. the Knicks are 13th in the league in first quarter defensive rating. They have a defensive rating in first quarters of 111.4. So that to me speaks to a reality of like, this is not an endemic problem. This is not like something that cannot be solved. In fact, they have been good in comparison to their regular defensive numbers, which are much lower than 13th. They've been good more often than they have not been good. But when they are bad and when they come out without the requisite level of whatever words you want to use, effort, intensity, connectiveness, communication. I want to get into Mikal Bridges' comments that he made after last night's game, which I thought were actually refreshing, and I was happy to read them. But like whatever words you want to use, it's when it's not there, it's really not there. And then they put themselves behind the eight ball. And then when you don't have, Towns like they didn't have last night, like I guess where I'm at right now is like, I'm trying to decide how bothered I want to be by last night, by the Pistons game. And I was, if you watch my post game, I was very, very annoyed in the moment. And like, maybe it pays to actually go to Mikal's comments now, because I think they're ultimately why I'm like, whatever. It's an 82 game season. They didn't come out ready to play against this Pistons team after they had won 4 in a row. It's the last game of a homestand. Maybe they're looking forward to the cup or their trip to Toronto or whatever the hell it was. But like, it was so blatantly obvious in the first half. Like, dude, you guys could be so much better. And you're just, this isn't, I'm going on and on. Let me say one more thing and I'll toss it back to you. This was not for me watching a game where it's like, oh my God, how are they ever going to survive defensively with Karl-Anthony Towns at the 5 against a good offensive team? This could be the death knell to this whole freaking experiment. If this isn't going to be this and that's not going to be that. This wasn't that. This was just like a group of guys who came out in the first quarter and they did not play up to the level that they're capable of playing. And oh, by the way, we were reminded of that in the third quarter when, I don't know how you felt. I felt watching that run towards the end of the third. And I know Cade wasn't on the floor for a lot of it, but like, that's as good a defense as they've played all year. So it's not like they're not capable of it. They just didn't do it.
They're absolutely capable of it. At times, it feels like their offense is so good that they just kind of rely on it. And then if the shot doesn't come around, then it's, well, we got to play defense. But by that point, it might be too late. No, the reason I wasn't bothered, really two reasons. I mean, yes, to your point, let's start with Karl-Anthony Towns. Obviously, if Cat had been playing, that's not a sign that the defense would have necessarily improved, but you feel better about the offense. You feel better about the identity. The whole team changes a bit. Like when Sims starts or Huck Porty plays or even Achua, there's far less spacing at the 5. So your game plan is going to change. The same thing would happen if Mitchell Robinson were healthy and were on the court as well. But the other factor here is in the NBA, any good team can lose on any given night. And if you look at the games around the league that happened, two things
last night.
Number one, the Boston Celtics gave up 127 points at home to a good Memphis Grizzlies team. I mean, they are good, but Boston typically dominates at home. But they were sluggish. And then the other is the Wizards beat the Nuggets. And the Nuggets aren't necessarily a world-beating team, but they have gotten better. They've gelled more. The Wizards have lost a ton of games. They have made the teams they've played against be historically great. The net ratings of some of these teams.
So that's that.
It's better than like the 96 Bulls and the 73 win Warriors team. I mean, that just goes to show how bad that Wizards team's been. And they got it together and beat Jokic, who had 56 points, and the Nuggets. So, I don't fault if anything, it's like, okay, well, the Pistons have been showing tremendous effort this year in a way that they just did not under Monty Williams. And they caught the Knicks on a night where the Knicks just kind of thought they could walk into it. And I don't know if it's the same thing with the Hornets with 2 games, at least the starts of 2 games, one in the first half, the other really won the whole game, and the other just in the first quarter, where the Knicks just felt like they were the better team, but they didn't necessarily go out and prove it. Whereas that Hornets team did come back. So, last time we talked about the defensive tenacity, a lot of it does still feel like effort related, but it's just, it's not gelling for like the tone that they're starting with is not sharp enough, and it's bleeding into the rest of the game. And instead of playing catch up, I just wish that the Knicks could essentially try to step on their opponent's necks from the jump so that you don't have to worry about, oh, well, we can catch up and try to bridge the gap, or, oh, they're hot on our heels and we've got this because the offense is just so much better than theirs.
You nailed so much stuff there. One thing I do want to go back to is you mentioned they like a slow start against the Magic. It was like 3 possessions against the Magic.
Yes.
I think the Magic game, it literally took them like 90 seconds to like kind of get into the game. And once they got into it, and I think the reason for that, as you just alluded to before, the Magic are a team that the Knicks wanted to come in, and I felt this way watching the game, wanted to make a point against. Like, you guys are ahead of us in the standings. You're feeling all good about yourselves. You've won 12 or 13 games. Okay, watch what we could do to you when we give a shit. And what they did over the course of, I think they outscored the Magic by like 37 or 38 points or something over the course of like 25 minutes of game time, whatever it was. It was absurd. Whereas last night, you have this Pistons team who they blew the doors off of at the game we watched at T Squared Social. Shout out to T Squared Social earlier this season. And like, they're not a threat to the Knicks in the East. And then you look at the comments that I was alluding to. These are both from Ian Begley. Shout out to Ian. I'm not sure which was first in the clip, but I'm just going to read 2 Mikal Bridges comments on where the Knicks were defensively. Not good, not good. I think we pick and choose when, and we ain't that good to be able to just pick and choose when we want to play defense. And then this is the rest of it. Communication was the biggest thing. And it's not like we don't like each other or anything. It's just that sense of urgency. We've got to understand that when we don't talk to each other, it's going to hurt us. I don't think anyone is going to accuse Josh Hart or Mikal Bridges or OG Anunoby or any of the centers or even Jalen Brunson, who had maybe his worst defensive game of the season last night, of not caring or not being willing to put in, the effort to do the things that you need to do to win a basketball game. But it's just like, again, it's like they're not quite where they need to be. And the difference between last night and a lot of other games, and this could maybe get into a little bit of a conversation about the offense and how we're feeling about that right now, is they weren't hitting their threes. So how many times did it feel like watching last night, there was a shot that they had, and they did hit some big threes in that run, where there was a shot that they had to really put a lot of pressure on the Pistons and like make the Pistons start to sweat, and it just didn't go in, and then you throw in Brunson with like a lot of uncharacteristic, weird turnovers from Brunson. It was a weird Brunson game. I know he was game time decision, so maybe that explains it. He played a ton of minutes. Yeah. So that's kind of where I'm at on that game. And then we could maybe move on.
It's one of those games where you feel like, in retrospect, you wish that Brunson hadn't even played. Because like, if you're going to lose to that team, you must lose with both of your guys rested. Campaign didn't play. It just, the Pistons also started out outscoring the Knicks 14-0 in transition points. The fast break killed the Knicks. And that's not something that usually has hurt the Knicks this season. In fact, they've been a pretty good fast break team. As far as cleaning the glass goes, I got you. Don't worry.
You're ahead of me. You're always 2 steps ahead of me.
No, not always. That's definitely not the case. But so this year the Knicks are actually, they're 12th in transition defense, which is pretty good. It's actually, I should reframe. It's not it's the half court defense that's really the problem, because the transition defense, though, last night was what was their Achilles heel for the beginning portion of the game. What's really crushing the Knicks is their half court defense, which this season ranks 24th in the NBA. And when you look at the teams that are surrounding them, if I wanted to just count down from 20th, it's the Kings, who have struggled mightily. It's the Pelicans, who are, you would imagine they're on death's door, but now they've won a couple games with their players healthy again. It's the Lakers, who have a tire fire on defense. It's the Suns, who have just been abysmal defensively, and they've been hurt a lot by KD being out. Then the Knicks, then the Nets, who they've got a good offense at least, but not strong there. Then Utah, Indiana, Charlotte, Chicago, Washington. So not a class that you want to be in when it comes to the half court defense. And that was a huge problem for them last night.
Yeah, it was. I'm sorry. What were we gonna say?
No. I should refrain because I need to double check the stats on the game itself as well. I had that up because
I'm looking at your numbers are all accurate
from the season. Yes, but you go ahead because I want to check myself on in terms of if the Knicks themselves from a half court perspective, how they perform.
Yeah, I want to bring a couple things up. For one, if you look at the Knicks half court defensive on-off stats, which I always find it helpful to not just look at a player's blanket on-off stats, but to look at the on-off stats where it comes to particular players in particular situations. What I found particularly notable, again, this is via cleaning the glass. The Knicks are 7.3 points per 100 possessions stingier. That's a big time number. That's almost in the 90th percentile league wide in the half court, specifically when OG Anunoby plays and when he's on the floor, I should say. And on the flip side, a guy who I don't think you would guess is their 8 points per 100 possessions worse on defense when he plays, and that's Josh Hart. Which it's really interesting to see the Knicks, like the guy. I think Josh Hart's defense has been pretty good this year.
Mm-hmm.
When you see a play where it's not good, it does stand out. And I think if we're keying in on guys for not bringing the energy and the intensity last night, I think Hart might be at the top of the list, at least from some of the stuff that I watched in the first quarter. So it was, Anunoby was out there, and yet I agree with you that the half court defense was bad, which is why I think last night was kind of an anomaly. Interestingly enough, the second best guy in terms of on-off for defense for half court is Jericho Sims, who was atrocious last night, and I think it was probably his worst game in quite some time. We could talk about the center rotation if you want to touch on that as well. But it's a mixed bag. Like their starting lineup, it's given up a little over 100 points per 100 in the half court. That's right around the team average. But then they have some other lineups that are pretty good. Like their second most used lineup this year, Sims, Anunoby, Bridges, McBride, and Brunson, only giving up 77 points per 100 in the half court. Now it's 129 possessions. It's not a lot of possessions, but they are clearly capable of putting out lineups that are good in their biggest area of team-wide struggle. So it is about going from point A to point B, and how can you translate what you are doing good at times, and clearly they are doing some good stuff at times, into more consistent in terms of how often it happens and consistency throughout lineups, which is obviously the challenge.
Exactly. And, just kind of looking at the Pistons game as well. So the Pistons were in the 68th percentile in the half court, 103.4 points per play. And their transition offense was in the 77th percentile. Okay. And then when you look at the Knicks, or rather when you look at what the Pistons normally do on a day-to-day basis, I mean, after last night's game, they are 20th in the NBA in half court points per play. So, they were clearly able to play better than they were, and the Knicks gave it to them. They let them into it as well.
Give credit to Cade. I said it last night. I want to say it again. Like, Cade absolutely played like an all-star last night. I think he will be an all-star. The stuff that I find a little bit more inexcusable is the Malik Beasley getting off 10 threes. And obviously a lot of those were just, they were just wide open. So look, we don't have to dwell on it. We're being probably a little bit too negative for a team that leading into last night had the best net rating in the league over the previous, I think it was 12 or 13 games. Like, they're doing a lot more good stuff than bad, even on defense. Yeah. I think, the defense has been better of late. Last night was not one of those nights. Let's talk about the offense a little bit. I want to get your thoughts on two things, and then we could do our one big takeaway for this past week. A few people commented to me on the post game about the reliance on threes and whether the Knicks were too reliant on threes. And I think this is a comment that you're going to get. I know you're okay. That tells me everything I need to know. I think this is a comment you're going to get anytime a team puts up like more than 23s, which is actually everybody puts up more than 23. So maybe that's a bad number, but like Really, it doesn't even matter how many they put up. Anytime a team just doesn't hit threes. And I saw those comments and I'm like, and I've been thinking about this a lot because the Boston Celtics are taking what was their own record for their highest 3-point frequency in NBA history, which already was a sizable record, and they are blowing the doors off that record. That blew the doors off the previous record. And it works out for them most of the time, and they just steamrolled their way to the championship, and they are favored to win the championship again, as they should be. So, like, I'm kind of the mindset, like, this is the goal. The goal is to always be putting up a lot of threes. I wanted to get your opinion on it and see maybe I'm missing something here.
Yeah, the reason I was laughing wasn't to be dismissive. It's because it's like, where did we start with? The very first game of the season. The Knicks aren't shooting enough threes. And then you keep going further to that. Why aren't they shooting more threes? And then it shifts to, they're shooting too many threes. What are we doing? And they're not shooting too many threes. I mean, if you
could argue they're not shooting enough.
Right. I mean, they're 17th in the NBA in frequency.
Yeah,
shooting
that's actually
threes.
That's low.
That's low. I mean, if anything, they should be shooting more. Yes, you're right. Boston is blowing the doors off of their own record. I mean, they're 52.7% at 3 frequency or 3-point frequency. It's nuts. But that's the thing. It's you have to find what works based on your personnel as well. And you do have an overall plan, but it needs to fit perfectly with that too. I mean, as we think through both in-house and what's to come, it's like, okay, well, are you bringing in players who would be contingent or who would be working with what you need from an offensive philosophy or working against it? And if you're doing that, then how does that impact the defensive side? It's the kind of yin and yang of how they connect. But no, I don't see it as the Knicks needing to take fewer threes. If anything, I think they should keep taking more, especially when you look at someone like Josh Hart, who's hitting an absurd clip.
Yeah.
Like, you don't want to say, hey, stop hitting threes. The guy in the starting lineup who is not supposed to be the floor spacer is doing a phenomenal job of doing that because he's getting open looks. It's not necessarily take more, take less. It's take the right amount, but take the right shots. You want to take, how open are you going to be? Is it the right percentage shot? Is that the best shot? Is there someone else who can hit a better shot? So many things that go into it where it shouldn't just be take more or take less. It's the quality of them specifically.
Yeah. And I think for me, it's the push and pull of, these guys are, when you talk about Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns, certainly. And I want to focus on them for a reason, which I'll get to in a second. They are, by any definition, by any metric, elite offensive players. Say what you want about Towns, his ups and downs and trials and tribulations. The guy's, there's just no other way to say it. The guy's a machine on offense. And Jalen Brunson, I don't need to shower Jalen Brunson with any more accolades. We get the point. Those guys are shooting this year from three. I have it right here. Sorry. Towns is shooting 45% from three, which is, if it's not first in the league on decent volume, it's right there. And Jalen Brunson is shooting 43% from three. And yet you look at their percentage of field goal attempts that come from deep. Karl-Anthony Towns, a little bit more than a quarter of his shots are threes, 27%. And Jalen Brunson, 32% of his shots are from behind the arc. And to put that number into perspective, and this is why I love cleaning the glass, he's taking about a third of his shots from behind the arc. That is in the 19th percentile league-wide. And he is taking, actually even better perspective, Jalen Brunson is taking a lower percentage of his shots from deep than Josh Hart. Josh Hart is taking 35% of his shots from behind the arc. Jalen Brunson is at 32%. Now, I'm not going to be critical of Jalen Brunson, who I think has been one of the 10 best offensive players in the league this year. I think Kat has an argument, has a similar argument. They both have been amazing, but it is interesting to me that McCall's put him. 45% of McCall's Bridges shots are from three. That's above the median. OG Anunoby is at 41%. That's it's fine. It's okay. It could be a little higher, but it's just It's interesting. I like how I started this with like, are the Knicks shooting too many threes, and we're ending this with like, how do they shoot more?
But the thing with Brunson is, I understand it, because if Brunson isn't driving to collapse the paint, who is in the starting line? So you need someone to open up these looks so that your Josh Harts and OG Anunobys and even Mikal Bridges can have an opportunity to space the floor. And Cat, you want to have some sort of role game there. I mean, he still has been proficient from around the rim and a little bit of mid-range with the hook. So I get from the Jalen Brunson side for why he might not be taking a ton of threes, but he's also hitting the ones that he takes. So it's the quality of that. I mean, the Knicks have now moved into the 18th in the league in free throw rate, which is a lot better than where it was before. Clearly they're getting calls. We saw, especially in the Hornets game, Mikal Bridges was getting fouls. I believe it was mentioned that he's getting fouled on almost as many shooting fouls, as he had all season, like just in that game. Like that's where he was drawing contact in a way that was beneficial. And the Knicks aren't drawing a ton of contact, and they're too stagnant if they're not driving, and no one else is really going to drive in that starting lineup. It's just not, I mean, maybe Josh Hart, because he's so good around the rim, but to me, I usually think of Josh Hart driving to the rim when it's oftentimes in transition, or if he's cleaning up, someone's misses. So it's not like he's initiating the offense to then create these open looks. And that's where Brunson excels. But yes, if we're able to collapse the paint, or see the Knicks collapse the paint more, being able to have Jalen Brunson be freed up for more of those open looks, I think would benefit them as well.
Let's move on to our one big takeaway, which I am going to bastardize and turn into something else. I don't usually do this, but I'm gonna have a hot take, Jeremy.
Okay.
Are you ready? Are your hand warmers on?
Yeah.
Or no, sorry, not hand warmers. It's like what do you, or like the gloves you wear when you're pulling apart like a hot piece of meat that you've just pulled out of the smoker to protect
oven mitts?
No, it's not enough. It's
I know what you're talking about. Yes, the actual gloves. Yes.
Yeah, the gloves. That's what you need to be wearing right now for this one. My one big takeaway, shout out to Juan, please go to Drink Juan, please, and check out where you can pick up yourself some Juan, please, to take home and enjoy with you, or just come to our next watch party at T-Square Social. My one big takeaway / my one hot take is that for the next when's the trade deadline? February 7th, 8th? February 6th. Okay. So we're past the 2-month mark. For the next 2 months, minus 2 days, Precious Achiuwa is the most, how could I put this? Is the most interesting player on the Knicks. And we've gotten him back now for 2 games. And over the course of those 2 games, we have seen him play with Karl-Anthony Towns, obviously not last night because Towns was out. We've seen him play with Karl-Anthony Towns. We've seen him play the 4. We've seen him play the 5. We have seen the Knicks do something which they have not done at all prior to the last 2 games, which is switch pretty much everything, or at the very least, any non-Brunson actions when Brunson is in the game, with Precious on the floor. And we have seen him already have some, I would define as a credible, notable, #meaningful impact on both ends of the floor, but certainly on offense. It's doing some of the things that we saw him do last year, his first year with the Knicks, and he has, I think, picked up right where he left off. This is my one big takeaway because I think it, and again, we were talking offline about when we're going to schedule our first cap or no cap of the year. I don't want to get into the weeds on it. Maybe you could give folks a little amuse bouche, if anything. But if everybody is healthy, he was on the bench last night, right? We presume he will be able to play basketball at some point. The Knicks don't have minutes for everybody that's on the roster right now. And you could argue that there is maybe a hole or two where they could go out and exchange something of what they have for something that they don't have right now. And my eyes are going to be all on Precious Achiuwa over the next 2 months. How well does he play? How many minutes does he play? Who does he continue to play with? all those sorts of things.
I'm with you. I'll refrain from an amuse-bouche because I feel like I've given a little bit before, but essentially, who is he playing with is something that I'm very curious about. Last night, first thing the Knicks did after going from Sims was turn to Hukporti, and then they turned to Achua at the 5. So it's clear that in those moments, they can do it. The main question I have is, are the Knicks turning to someone like Precious at the 5 because they want to or because they feel they have to? Because we saw what it looked like in terms of the Hornets game. As Benji highlighted in his clip in Twitter, the switching was phenomenal. It was exciting to see the Knicks match up across the board with all of these players. But it goes back to, okay, well, is that ultimately what they want? Do they ultimately want to have it where a switch scheme where Precious is seeing heavy minutes? Mitchell Robinson's back. How are they balancing all that? I'll pause there because I don't want to keep bleeding into future pods.
No, I know.
But it's a really good point because it's good to have someone like him back, but how he's deployed, and if how he's deployed is consistent with what will be or simply with what is, because there's a huge difference between what you're comfortable with now and external factors that could change a whole lot.
I think so much of this depends on something that we frankly cannot know right now, which is what version of Mitchell Robinson will be here when he gets back. Because if it's the very best of Mitch, and we saw the best of Mitch this time last year, we were getting the best of Mitch. We were getting an all defense version of Mitch, and the guy who's the best offensive rebounder in like NBA history, or he was on pace for that through like 20 games. Are we getting that guy, or are we getting the version that we saw after he came back from injury last year? So I don't know. What is your one big takeaway?
My one big takeaway is that the Knicks have played 23 games this year. If you look at the 23 games they played last year, the first 23, the Knicks played 10 games that were decided by 7 points or less, and they were 5-5 in those games. This year, through 23 games, they've only played 5 games that have been determined by 7 points or less. They're 2-3. The records themselves don't really have an impact because it's about, we're talking about one more win. Or if they played one more game and it had been a win, it's the same. It's 500, or it's so close. It's not really the point. It kind of goes back to our conversation about effort and talent and what the Knicks are able to do. I don't know if I can prove this, but it's more of a feeling where, like, with that feast or famine type vibe, I don't want to see the Knicks in the trenches, right? I'd love to see the Knicks just going out and winning every single game, double-digit margins. We're all happy. But there's that feeling of, well, if you're going to lose, at least have it be a close game. This last night was not a close game. And I feel like, you either win or you learn in life, in sports, whatever it is. And the Knicks have done a whole lot of winning. And the losses, that's where you usually do a lot of your learning. And the trouble is that in those moments where it's really close, they just haven't had a whole lot of them. So I feel like from an identity standpoint, do they have more to gain by having these close losses? Because then they can figure out, hey, what's going wrong? Like when the Knicks started out, they were 0-3 or 0-3 on the year on those close games. And to me, it was, those are really annoying, but what can you learn from them? How can you improve? Like that Bulls game, they shouldn't have been down by as much as they were, 22 points, 24 points, but they came back and they lost, and that was disappointing. But we were able to, at least from the team perspective, they were able to understand more about their identity, who they are, what they can be. When you lose games by a significant amount, but also win games by a significant amount, we know what the Knicks can do in those wins. I just would love to learn what the Knicks can learn about those closer losses. And
you know what the problem? Oh, sorry.
No, I don't want the Knicks to lose games. I don't want to see good wins then like, well, they should be closer. They should be nail biters. No, it's just like the losses that are bad. I just want them to be better losses because I just want those feelings to be, we're close. How do we get to the point where it's even better? And right now, of the Knicks' 9 losses, 6 of them have been pretty abysmal.
You know what the problem is? Their last 4 losses, 3 of them they all should have learned the exact same thing, which is give a shit from the opening tip. The Utah game, the Bulls game, and the Pistons game last night, all three of those games featured absolutely scintillating comebacks in which the team went on a significant run, a double-digit run in which they held or like at least 10-0, in which they like completely shut the faucet off in terms of what the other team was able to do on offense. The Jazz, the Pistons, and the Bulls. And all three of them resulted in losses. Obviously, the Bulls game came down to the wire more than the other two. But in all those games, you could look at it and say they ran out of gas. And then the fourth loss was the Mavs, where they certainly turned it on more in the second half. And they had, I didn't even realize this until I looked it up earlier this week. They had a 70-point second half against the Mavs, but it didn't matter because the Mavs were hitting everything on defense. And that's even without Luka, is a different caliber of offensive team than the Pistons, the Jazz, and the Bulls. Although the Bulls have been pretty good. Anyway, look, we've been talking for 35 minutes. There's been a lot more negatives than positives. Team is 14-9 and they have the 6th best net rating in the league. So like we are nitpicking today.
Yes.
And we are nitpicking because they're talk about a backhanded compliment. Their best has warranted us looking at them as like, you're too good for this shit. And let's go out there and show it more consistently.
Yeah. It's not even cynicism. It's purely just like there's an implicit understanding this is a really good team, but they're missing that gear that gets them from really good to truly great, because the offense is truly great, but there's the defensive component that just has to be cleaned up, and the effort, you need to see a little bit more of it.
And look, there's 3 great teams in the league this year. There's only 3, so it's like, which is good for them, lucky for them. Unfortunately, two of the 3 great teams are in their conference, as my daughter's getting very feisty over here. All right, let's give out some game balls. Given, of course, every week to a player, coach, or entity that has done something very good and deserves to be praised for their effort. So I'm just giving this out for the last 3 games, right?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know why I thought this was I'm like, man, enjoy your youth, Jeremy, because getting old, it sucks, and it comes for all of us, even you.
Yeah, believe me, I know that. I'm already facing a moral. I mean, look, I'm on the doorstep of a new decade, so I get it.
Nobody tell my wife this, because it's a bad thing. It'll ruin the surprise. Our 10-year wedding anniversary is coming up in 5 days, and I spent my morning and last night looking through photos because I'm putting together something for her as a gift. And like, I see pictures of myself from a few years ago. I'm like, man, what a fucking time to be alive. And now I'm just old and I can't remember anything. So again, enjoy your youth, Jeremy. That's the only thing I'm going to say. Okay. Who am I giving a game ball to? I can't give it to Towns. I thought Towns had a really good week. I can't give it to him though, because he only played 2 of the 3 games. So I'm not going to do that. I don't know. Everybody from last night kind of left a sour taste in my mouth. And like, Towns is actually the one guy who didn't, because he was 2-0 this week. I'll give it to OG. I'm going to give it to OG with a tip of the cap to Jalen Brunson, who his percentages this week shot 57% from the field, 56% from 3, and 81% from the line. Like, but I thought he was not at his best last night. So OG Anunoby averaged 20 points a game for the week. He shot off the charts, 53, 47, 83, in a game that was not a highlight reel defensively. He yet again had a personal highlight reel. I mentioned it on the post game. Somebody I should probably give credit to who the hell this person is. I'll look for them right now. First Knicks since Patrick Ewing to have 4 steal, 2 block games in consecutive games. So yeah, OG Anunoby, really good. Skylar Durrell. Shout out to you, Skylar Durrell, for finding that. Shout out to OG Anunoby. He gets my game ball.
Yeah, and he got a mic. I don't know if you saw that, but they're going to give him his own mic so he doesn't have to keep stealing from Alan Hahn.
There it is.
Yeah, definitely a worthy candidate. I'm going to take a slightly different approach, and I'm going to give it to the entire team for the reason of clinching Group A for the NBA Cup. Again, I don't blame people for not caring about the NBA Cup, but I'm going to, unless, of course, the Knicks lose, in which case I really just don't care at all. But the ability for the Knicks they went into the night where they could either make it by winning or they pretty much were just going to be bounced. And then you had the fun drama of, well, are the Knicks going to win by so much that then the Celtics get in? And now you're looking at the Celtics getting in to the NBA Cup and making the harder road. And of course, it shaked out where that was not the case. But, it's still, the Knicks benefited, of course, from an easier group, but they faced challenges as well. The Nets game was a lot closer than it probably should have been, but even though the Nets are a feisty team on offense. Hornets game, same thing. Sixers game, that was a really nice one to win against. And then the Magic game. So we'll see how they're tested in this cup that the NBA is trying to create. But it's just, it's nice to see the Knicks winning something. Now they've just got to do the rest of it. And I'm excited because I'll be in the building for the Hawks games. The first regular season.
That's awesome.
I'll be there. And I get to care about a Wednesday game in December that would have otherwise been like, it's just another regular season game.
If they win and you are not very drunk, or maybe even if you are drunk, maybe that's even more of a reason. I think you should call in somehow to the post game for like 5 minutes to just give a vibe check on what it's going to be like, or what it was like in the arena. Only if they win. If they lose, I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to fucking talk to anybody. Okay. Detention given to a player, coach, or entity who deserves to sit down and think about what they have done wrong this week in a quiet room. Jeremy, you are up first with this.
Sure. Well, I gave it to one team, so I'm going to give it to another team. I'm going to give my detention for this week to the Los Angeles Lakers. I'm not going to go with the Knicks route. I'm going to take a step away from the Knicks. I'm going to give it to the Lakers because the Lakers have built a team to sell tickets. This has been clear for a minute, but that loss to the Heat was just disgusting. The on-offs with LeBron. I mean, it's very clear that he's now just trying to stay healthy and putting up points where they can. But all they're doing, it feels like, is being a cash cow until LeBron retires, and then they'll figure it out. And then they'll probably do the same thing, which is tank, collect assets, and then try to wrangle free agents, even though free agency is largely dead, trade for players, all that stuff. But it's a team that defensively is so bad. I looked this up. It was really within the week. I'm going to see if the stats have changed at all, because I don't know about you, John. Have you been following any of the Lakers statistical factors?
I mean, I know generally speaking, I know they're one of the worst teams in the league in defensive rating, but beyond that, what are you talking about?
So defensively, if you look at the defensive EPM of the Lakers, you scored it. The number one player, defensive EPM, Anthony Davis. He's in the 84th percentile. He's been great defensively this year. The next best player, who is a rotation player, so not Armel Barore, but then the one after that is Max Christie. Would you like to guess what percentile of DEPM he is?
43rd.
Close, 40th.
Okay.
So, and then everyone else is below that. So the second best player on the Lakers from a defensive standpoint is half as good statistically by DEPM as their best player. Like,
Christie actually made a hell of a play blocking Trae Young's attempt to win the game at the end of regulation the other night against the Hawks.
Mm-hmm.
But
and then what happened in overtime?
Nothing good.
Yeah, exactly. So I get it. They're missing Austin Reeves as well. But that's not exactly going to help you defensively, even though he's gotten better. I mean, this is someone who was in the first percentile before, and now he's in the 40th as well. So, it's it's also to show the Lakers as an example. I mean, the Knicks and the Lakers are completely different teams, but these are two teams that are poor defensively. One where I have full confidence that they can find ways to get better. The other, which is banking on, and LeBron mentioned this, and I get it, but also like he talked about Jackson Hayes and Austin Reeves and some other players as big pieces that they're missing. And it's like Christian Wood, I think, was another one. It's like, it's not going to get you where you think it's going to get you. And the Lakers are this team where they've got picks to use, but then do they care enough to use it? Do they really want to? All this just stems from letting Caruso walk and trading for Westbrook. And it just shows how one terrible move can just ruin an entire franchise. And they're a really terrible defensive team. And their coach is not exactly a defensive savant, or at least wasn't when he was playing. So I'm very curious as to how his impact on the defensive side, if at all, registers. But that I don't know if that team gets better. And if they don't, it's just a slippery slope.
I'm not sure I would define them as fascinating because they're not going to trade it. Well, you can't trade these giant contracts in season anymore. It's just not feasible. So it's like, what are they going to do this year? I do think they become an interesting summer team, but yeah, we'll cross that bridge, I guess, when we come to it. They could make a move for like a smaller. You know, what I'm interested in. I know this is a Knicks podcast. I don't want to go on for too long about this, but after all the DeJounte Murray stuff last year, they could conceivably find a deal for Murray this time around. They have the money to do that and make that work. And Pelicans trying to get into the luxury tax. They're obviously not going anywhere this season. So I don't know. Interesting.
But then are the Pelicans flipping Murray right after they've acquired him?
But who the hell knows with that team? Like nothing. It's not working right now. I don't know. Sure. I'm only asking questions. That's all.
No, I mean, there was the other outside of the box one, which is, I saw this online, which I don't fully subscribe to it, but the idea that the Lakers just say, you know what, let's find a way to just move on from LeBron, which just don't see that happening. Because the only thought was the Warriors, and why the Warriors would then trade for a 40-year-old, you know, they've got things to figure out as well, but probably better suited looking for a center. Either way, Lakers are just tire fire.
Yeah, and just to give it some context, because you could, someone, maybe even a Laker fan might listen to you say that and be like, well, hold on, you're, throwing arrows here at the Lakers. The Lakers are 26th in defense. The Knicks are 18th in defense. The Lakers are in their own category of bad defensively. They're giving up 117.6 points per 100 possessions. The Knicks are at 114.1. The difference between the Lakers and the Knicks is the difference between the Knicks and the Celtics, actually, or the Cavs, like either one of those teams who are 9th and 10th in the league in defense. So Knicks very much more middle ground. Lakers are very bad.
One last thing, and if a Lakers fan were to say, talking about the Knicks defense in comparison to the Lakers defense, I would say as a Knicks fan, I know what bad defense looks like, so I know when I see it, and the Lakers have a bad defense.
Very true. I watched that Hawks game. My jaw was on the floor. I mean, do you want to talk about? It's not even letting go of the rope. Like they lost the rope. I'm giving my detention to Jericho Sims. Jericho Sims this week. Talk about not showering yourself in glory. He played 22 minutes and he was a minus 23 in those 22 minutes. I don't. A couple of people I think brought up on the post game. Andrew actually I think texted this. Is Jericho Sims? Will he be going the way of the dodo bird? I don't know that we're there yet. He is a very frustrating player to watch when he is not playing well, and that's not that does not bode well for your job security if you are essentially a 10 to 15 minute a game off the bench backup big. So Jericho, do better. That was advice.
Jericho is second on my list in terms of who I would give detention to. And the reason I ultimately didn't give it to him is because I'm going to go back to the point that I've had for ages. He is the equivalent of a quadruple A player, where it's not so much a slight because you're going to have good moments from that player, but consistently on the whole, and I know what the defensive rim protection stats look like, and I think that's been productive. But then you also look at what the offensive side, like some of those turnovers were just frustrating for us as fans, but also kind of not enjoyable, but amusing, because seeing Tibbs' reaction from them was almost worth it. Like, if you're going to have those moments, at least have Tibbs throw his arms up in disgust and then bring someone else in. But that's just kind of who Jericho is. He's going to have nice moments, and he's going to have a lot of bad moments. And usually you live with those bad moments because you don't have someone else to play. And if Jericho Sims is playing, a major reason for why he's playing is because there are other players who are simply not available that the Knicks would rather play ahead.
You know who the ideal Tom Thibodeau backup big man is? Shocking that I'm going to say this guy, Taj Gibson. And not even like good prime Taj Gibson, who was much better than that. I'm talking about old Taj Gibson. Because you know what the thing about old Taj Gibson was? The floor was high. He never went below that baseline level. Was he blowing you away with this, that, and the other thing? No. But he did everything at such a sound level of basic competence that you could trust him. And Sims has kind of not been the opposite of that, but like his inconsistency has made him the opposite of that. When he's not going well, like there's a bunch of stuff that falls below that line. So, you know, it's not what you want.
It's a quick hook, and taking a step back for a moment. I mean, obviously Sims struggled in the Pistons game, but then there's the question of why was he starting in the first place? Why was it
Towns was out?
Achua was, well, sure, we know why that's it, but it's like, as opposed to Achua, is that the sort of thing where the Knicks were comfortable? Tibbs wanted to have that look of Sims instead of Precious. I know Precious is just coming back. We've talked before of, is he the guy where the Knicks really want him at the 5, or does he just play minutes at the 5 more out of necessity? He obviously, because we saw some minutes with him and Towns, but that's easier because Towns can play the 5. It's just harder to do, but Sims slots in as that guy who just fills minutes because he has to. And it gets to a point where it's, well, if we're talking about how the Knicks start games, is that the tone they want to start with? Because the game was, I don't want to say it was over by the time Sims was pulled, but the damage had been done.
I mean, I think the fact that he played 6 minutes and then didn't check back into the game tells you all you need to know about Tom Thibodeau's opinion of Jericho Sims' performance. So, you know, I said it last night. I appreciated the fact that Tibbs started him after a bad game. Give your young player a vote of confidence. Like, hey, you had a bad game. I'm not going to hold it against you. Go out there and get him tonight. But didn't work out. Okay. Predictions. So I'm guessing we're only doing 2 games, right?
So this is where we actually need to discuss what we're doing for predictions this week and whether or not we want to just make predictions for the NBA Cup, make prediction, because we don't know who the third game will be as of right now. We don't know whether it's a runner-up game or a consolation game. You know, you tell me. I'll go to Jeremy before I go to the Macries.
I'm inclined to say let's do it. You know, I mean, it's a little tricky.
I gave multiple options, and you said let's do it. What are we doing?
Mission
the answer is yes. All 3. No, got it.
I think we should.
All the above.
I think we should still make predictions for the games. And I know that the third one not happening is a wild card. So it's really, I guess, what I would pose to Jon is how scared do you feel about losing because you don't know who you're playing? Are you a coward or are you willing to be brave?
Okay. Couple things. One, it has to, so we're picking 3 games.
So we don't know the third game. So I'm inclined, just from a format standpoint, to say you're just predicting how many wins will they have this week, not records. How many wins will they have this week? And to Jeremy's question, Mr. Respect the Opponent, do you project that they'll go 3-0 this week, or are you chicken?
No, we could pick 3 games. They're going to play 3 games this week, so we should pick 3 games.
So I'm saying, are you picking 3 wins? Or are you picking 2? Are you just picking 1? Are they going to be? Yeah,
it's my pick first, right?
Yes,
I'm picking 2 and 1.
Okay. So we just said we're only predicting wins this week. So you're picking.
I am
wins.
predicting they will have 2 wins. I don't.
Okay, there you go. Jeremy, how many wins do you predict the Knicks will have this week?
I mean, it's either 1 or 3 at this point. I'm trying to figure out what benefits me most.
Because in John's world, they can lose to RJ tomorrow and still advance in the NBA Cup. So that's why it's interesting.
Yes. Bit of a bind. I don't really want to say 1. That's depressing.
Don't say 1. Go for it. Go big or go home.
Well, hush you. You've got skin in the game here. Don't reverse psychology to me.
He turned it on.
I took 3 last week and I thought it was gonna be fine. So
he's trying to get Hal to spend more. He's like, you won't.
Or you want me to take 1 because you're confident they'll do. I mean, at the end of the day, I think it'll be 2. So screw it. I don't really want to root for only 1. So I'll go for 3.
Hell yeah.
I love it. I hope you win. I hope they steamroll to the NBA Cup, for as much as I may not care all that much about that. I want them to just keep winning. That's all that it comes down to. Okay. We have some announcements coming up, but before we get there, Jeremy, anything else before we go there?
No, all set on my end.
And all set on my end as well. Andrew, we want to do some announcements?
Yes, Knicks Film School pregame pod live at noon on Monday with Esbar Heaney. We'll be live on the Knicks Film School YouTube channel previewing the Knicks against the Raptors. Also, Nick Hawks Fan TV will be joining me for a pregame live stream. Tuesday night, we'll be doing a scaled out pregame show for the NBA Cup as the Knicks take on the Atlanta Hawks in the NBA Cup. And then just for future reference, we mentioned this over the weekend in the pod we did with Peter from JUAN, Please. But December 21st, Saturday nights, when the Knicks take on the Pelicans, will be our next watch party. Going to be Christmas themed, or I guess in this case, Knicksmas themed, so holiday themed. So more details to come there. And that's it. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in.
Yes, thank you, and a big special thank you to Andrew Claudio, who's going to edit this podcast with my daughter in the background for the entirety of
I've literally been doing it her whole life. You're welcome.
Literally her whole life.
Literally her whole life.
Not quite all of Scarlett's life, but you've been doing it for all of Isabel's life. Does Isabel want to say hi before we go? Izzy, you want to say hi?
And now you got nothing?
Did you hear her say no?
Oh, we didn't.
That is something.
Oh.
That is something.
Yeah,
there you go.
She turned to the camera.
I'm leaving here with something. Yeah.
Something. All right. Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, everybody at home, for checking out another edition of the Knicks Film School Podcast. Don't forget to check out all the stuff that Andrew just said. Mark that watch party on your calendar. It's going to be a fun one. I will have to figure out what ugly / bad sports piece of clothing I'm going to wear to that. I'll make it a fun one. And we will see all of you all very soon. Enjoy your week. Peace out and talk to you later.